Hey, what's up guys? Chris Trini here for Chris Corp Productions. Welcome to this week's video. I've been super busy for the past couple of weeks, so instead of just coming up with a new effect to break down and do a tutorial on, I figured I'd just show you a couple of things that I'm doing for the projects that I'm currently working on. Now, some of the principles that we're going to be looking in this tutorial have already been explored in some of my previous tutorials, but I figured I'd just give you a few more examples on ways of applying those techniques. So let's jump into After Effects and let's get started. So this is the scene that we're going to be working with, and I'm going to start by creating a new null object because we need to track our scene since we have a little bit of camera movement. So I'm just going to go under Animation, Track Motion, and then I'm just going to pick a spot that has some nice sharp edges and just some good contrast that our tracker can work with. And we have plenty of choices in this image, but I'm going to go with this little spot here on the wall. And once I find a good spot, I'm going to click on Track Forward, and After Effects, it's going to do its tracking magic. And then once we're done, we're gonna, make sure that the target is our null that we created, and then we're gonna hit apply and click OK when this box appears. And we have a null that perfectly sticks to our scene. And we're gonna be using this to track any kind of lighting or shadows effects that we're gonna be creating. So let's do exactly that, and we're gonna create a new solid. We can make it black, or what I usually do is I pick whip the darkest part of my image just to keep it consistent with the rest of the look. Then let's just shut that off for now, and let's just start to draw some, pretty much just some sort of spotlights that are created by these fluorescents. Now obviously, as you can see by this image, fluorescents have a very large spread, but we're exaggerating and giving them a direction. Nothing too complicated, just creating some masks on the solid, setting them to subtract. You can go as detailed as you want with this. And then you can change the transfer mode to soft light, and this makes it blend with the environment quite well. Now we need to make sure that this dark solid is parented to our null so it can stick to our scene. And then as I scrub through here, you can see that it's sort of not fitting our scene entirely. So I'm just going to be lazy and stretch this out, but ideally when you're first creating the solid, you want to make sure that it's larger than your composition so that you have some room to play with. So I'm going to create a new solid, and I'm just going to create sort of a vignette effect. So just create a circular mask, set it to subtract, feather it out. Then you can, sort of play with the mask expansion. And of course you can play with the opacity of any of these layers because they might be a little bit too harsh. If I jump into Premiere, you can see as soon as it refreshes that it is quite harsh, that the shadows that we created are very harsh. And as you can see in my timeline, I have an adjustment layer over everything with my grading, and it's really crushing all of those darker areas of the image, so it's not really working unless you want this sort of a dramatic effect in your scene. Not quite what I'm going for. Now of course you can drop in some curves in Premiere, brighten the whole scene up, and just make sure you're not overexposing any areas of your image. You want to keep it nice and dynamic. But if that's still not enough, of course you can mess around with the opacity of any of the layers that we created in After Effects to get your desired look. So this is what the shot looks before any grading, and this is what it looks like after. We added some nice anamorphic bars, and of course there's a heavy grade to our S-Log2 footage. So let's take a look at our next shot. This is just the exterior of this same place, but right off the bat we can notice that there are quite a few elements that are distracting our viewers from where the attention should be, which is in the center of the frame into the entrance to the shot. And that is the car on the side and this very bright street on the far left of the screen. It's sort of allowing your viewer's eyes to navigate and browse around all over the image instead of just focusing on the center of it where the action is taking place. So this is an example where you sort of need to have a strategy behind where you want your viewer to look, and based on that you can then add shadows, add light, and pretty much guide your audience's attention to where you want it to be. So let's drag this clip into our timeline in Premiere. This way I can show you how to dynamic link, which by the way I've done a tutorial which covers all of it extensively, and you can find it in the annotations popping up at the bottom here. So let's drag that in. You can see that I already have some grading applied to it because of our adjustment layer. Let's right click on it and select replace with After Effects composition. So now we have that same clip of that length in a composition in After Effects. And we're pretty much going to do the same process here. We're creating a new null object, and we're tracking our scene here. So this spot seems pretty good for our tracker. Gonna make our tracking area just a little bit bigger, and then I'm gonna hit track forward. Then hit apply, click OK, and now we have a null that once again sticks to our scene so that we can parent all of the elements that we're going to be creating to that null so that they follow our camera movement. New solid, just like before. The solid settings should be the same as our previous shot, so I'm going to click OK. And this time, I'm going to be a little bit smarter, and I'm going to scale this solid up so that I have a little bit more room to play with. Now what I'm going to do is pretty much draw a cone of light, and the idea here is that it's sort of being emitted by this sign, this neon sign on top of the shop's entrance. Again, this is all very subjective. It obviously depends on your scene, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep in mind what my light sources are in my scene and drawing shapes of light based on them. Again, just examine your shot before drawing anything and sort of figure out a way to simulate light based on the sources that you have within your shot. So now let's take care of blocking some of the light coming from that left street and blocking our right side of the image so that we don't pay too much attention to that car. Again, I made the same mistake. I should have made the solid a little bit larger, since as you can see as I scroll down to the bottom here, we're seeing a sharp edge. So I'm going to just make a few adjustments just to fix that. And obviously you have to readjust the mask. But once you do that, you can see that your eyes are already being drawn to the center where they should be. Now if we jump in back into Premiere, you can see that we created sort of a very exaggerated effect. It almost looks like someone's just shining a flashlight or a spotlight onto this building. And that might be what you want, but it doesn't really work for this scene. So we need to just make a few adjustments just to make it look a little bit more natural while still drawing in the viewer's attention to this shop's entrance. So you can see that just by lowering the opacity of some of these solids that we created, we are achieving a much less exaggerated effect. And of course we can take it a step further by adding some curves in Premiere like we did before. And we're just going to make a few final changes a little bit later, but for now I want to show you another thing that you can do. So what we're going to do is create a new adjustment layer, and we're going to make a mask that sort of follows the shape of these windows as well as the main entrance of the shop. And then of course you need to parent it to the null object so that it sticks to our scene, and then we can feather the mask out. And then I'm going to add an effect called exposure, and as you can tell by the name, it's going to affect the exposure of this portion of our scene. And if I bump it up, you can see that we're seeing more of what's inside the shop, and that's going to help to draw the audience's eyes further into the shop. And we can even create a sort of glow that's being emitted by the lights from inside the shop out into the streets. So what we're going for here is sort of a look that's a lot later in the day than what we're seeing here in the shot, so that the streets are a little bit darker, the sun is probably setting, and our main source of light is the light from inside the shop. So in this adjustment layer, I added a tint effect, and I'm just pretty much just sort of trying to match the warmish colors of the fluorescent lights inside. Fluorescents are almost never this warm, but the way I white balance my camera, I wanted to exaggerate the warmth of these particular fluorescents. Since the shop that we're seeing needs to seem like a warm place, a welcoming place, and greenish white fluorescents aren't really the best sources of light to achieve that sort of idea. I really want to explore a lot more on just cinematography in general and lighting your scene, because nothing is random. There's always a thought process going into a light placement, the color of a light, and I really want to just focus in on these particular elements of filmmaking in future videos, so hopefully there'll be a lot more on that soon. So anyways, to further add to the idea of being later in the day and having the shop's lights as the main sources of light in the scene, what I can do is add a curves effect to our footage layer and sort of mess with it until we get the sort of effect that we want. And at this point, once you have your scene basically set up, it's all a matter of just going back and forth between Premiere and After Effects and adjusting the opacity of the layers that we created, the curves adjustment that we made on our footage layer, and obviously jump back and forth between Premiere, because Premiere is going to show you what the final shot looks like with all the color grading. And speaking of which, of course, we can modify the color grading itself to better suit what we're trying to do, so we can mess around with some of these settings. In this case, I'm using Magic Bullet Looks, which is a fantastic plugin for both After Effects and Premiere, as well as a bunch of other programs. And it allows you to pretty much just color grade on the go, be very fast and efficient, and still be a very powerful tool. So this is what our before shot looks like, and again, keep in mind that this is S-Log2 footage, which is very flat, and this is our shot after all the adjustments. So definitely quite an improvement. Alright guys, that is it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like button, and I hope you learned just new ways of improving your shot. And I hope this goes to show that you don't need fancy cameras or expensive gear to get a cinematic look. It's all about being creative and thinking outside the box and really making the best of the tools you got. One of them being After Effects. So much more of all of this is coming up in the future videos. If you haven't checked out these other two tutorials, they're related to this sort of idea of improving your shots in After Effects. So definitely check them out. Anyways, I'm super thankful for all you guys' support, all the shares, likes, and comments that you give to my videos. They definitely help a lot and they help this channel grow. Anyways, my name is Chris Juni for Chris Corp Productions. I'll see you next time.